This is the China Hollywood Greenlight podcast, episode number 38.
And rolling sound. Quiet.
Here we go. Ready.
Speeding. 120, take 7.
And action.
This is Caryn McCann, the host of the China Hollywood Greenlight podcast, a podcast about creating and distributing content for both Hollywood and China. If you like the show, please go to iTunes or your favorite podcast directory, subscribe, and leave a rating. These ratings really do help spread the word. Any links mentioned in the podcast can be found at the show notes at chinahollywoodgreenlight.com/podcast, and look for this episode, which is number 38. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to start out with a motivational quote to encourage our listeners to continue on their path to achieving their own green light. And today's quote is from George Bernard Shaw, and he said, "Life isn't about finding yourself. Life is about creating yourself." A quick update on what I'm working on. I'm gearing up for the American film market. Also, I finished a low-budget, limited-location TV movie called The Magic Bookshop. It is out to readers, and I hope to get feedback next week. Then I will begin conversations with my short list of producers. Other news, as you know, I also run the China List. This is a membership website to connect writers and producers in Hollywood and China. Producers and talent reps get free membership. Just go to https://chnlist.com. Writers get in on our 60-day free trial soon. It expires November 1st, 2021. You can get your material seen in Hollywood and China, and you can post requests for Chinese or Western writing partners on our private writing jobs page. Use this URL before November 1st, 2021. https://chnlist.com/promo. Now here is the main segment. Today's guest is Keith Collea, who began working in film 20 years ago, putting his engineering background to good use for directors like Roland Emmerich, James Cameron, Michael Bay, and Michael Mann. Remaining on the front line of all technological breakthroughs, Collea saw an opportunity to democratize filmmaking. He built his own pipeline for indies, using his tools to make effects-heavy, smaller-budget films rival the look of studio tentpole productions. Having worked for James Cameron and Vince Pace, his longtime business partner, during their initial foray into 3D, Collea had a head start incorporating 3D into his own pipeline. Using this technology, Collea recently designed and supervised the 3D workflow of Universal Soldier, A New Dimension 3D, The Mortician 3D, Legendary Showcase 3D, and the Russian feature Mystery of the Snow Queen. Well, Keith, thank you for coming on the show today.
Well, thank you. Remind me to send you an updated version of my resume there. Actually, 30 years. I started when I was 10 years old. Okay. And so there's about 10 years of other things that I also worked on. But we'll skip all that. I mean, if somebody wants to know what I've been doing, they can just look me up. But thank you for having me on the show. I hope we have a good conversation, and I hope it's fruitful for those that are listening. Oh,
well, of course. You have quite the resume, and IMDb is amazing. You've got all these credits, and not only that, you've got this amazing East-West experience. Anyone goes on LinkedIn can see that. But let's start with the basic question. Sure. Why did you want to enter the China market?
Well, two things. First, when I was in college, or even when I was a kid, we were doing wushu fighting.
Oh, really?
And I was learning martial arts, and Asia was this mysterious place where magical things happened and people could do superhuman things, and right. There was this honor code, and that comes out in the when I was in college in the 80s on, I think it was the USA Network. There was nighttime kung fu Fu Theaters, I think is what it was called.
Okay.
And it had all of the shows out of Hong Kong, and they all were dubbed in English. So, they would say, "What are you doing here?" And the lips would just keep going on for 5 minutes. And but yet there was this, those stories all had the same things in common. They all were like the wandering kung fu artist through the backlands of China, and carrying everything he owned in a bag on his back. And if anybody insulted his teacher, he would have to fight them to the death. And it was all based on honor and adventure and strict discipline and code and all of these just wonderful kinds of things. But did I, and that was Chinese film, and those are the films I watched when I was in film school. I mean, we were never taught about that stuff. There was Asian fighting films that Kurosawa did, and but there was never anything like this wonderful genre of these stories that took themselves so seriously and were made obviously on a shoestring budget, but had these amazing athletes. And I just fell in love with that whole scene. But I never thought I was going to work in China. And it wasn't until 2008 in the United States, when the banks had a meltdown, that I was doing some consulting work for a company, and I was in Amsterdam, and there was a gentleman from China that was at this same conference with me, and we just got to talking, and this was in 2009, and he said, "You should come to China."
Okay.
And I just thought, yeah, that's crazy. China's this backwards place where they make these low budget movies, and I'm thinking Kung Fu Theater, and I'm scared. And in America, you're always trained that China's the enemy, and so I mean, seriously.
So it was you found the Kung Fu movies, and you found some contact, and they convinced you to go to China.
Well, he invited me. He had a film company in China. And he invited me to take part in a project. And I thought, and I have equipment, I have technology, I own technology. So, he wanted me to bring some stuff. And because China was just beginning back then to start its commercial run in film. I mean, we'd all seen Hero, we'd seen Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, House of Flying Daggers, the Zhang Yimou, the Ang Lee. Wonderful, amazing films that kind of ignited that there was stuff coming out of China. I mean, there was something in China. So, I mean, there was a question, but it was, and then the Olympics. I think we had the 2008 Olympics. Right. Zhang Yimou,
of course,
did the opening ceremony, and it was like phenomenal. But everybody thought, yeah, that's really great stuff, but it's, smoke and mirrors. We're not seeing the real China. So, he was telling me, to come to China and bring my gear, and he had a project, and I kept saying, no way, I'm not going to send my equipment there. And so finally I said, he told me he had a project with Rain Lee and Chris Doyle. And Chris Doyle was working on it, and it was Rain Lee. She's a director, cinematographer, and she was shooting something, and Chris Doyle was going to be there, and they wanted to use my Cooke S4 lenses. So I finally said, okay, but I'm coming.
Right,
and
of course.
So when I came, I was blown away. By then it was 2010, and so I mean, it wasn't like I planned any of this. It's sort of like China kind of chose
me. You, yeah.
And then it kind of got reinforced. I worked on a project. My friend introduced me to some producers, and who gave me my first break on a big Hollywood style. I mean, it was a huge Chinese movie, and kind of like a Hollywood blockbuster type production. which started in 2010, right after my first trip here.
Wow.
And then after that, I thought, okay, well, that was totally cool. I'll never be back to China again.
And
by then, I had guys that, when I worked on that production, I had a little crew that I had trained. And so I left. And a show that I had just done in 2000 in New Orleans was a British-American co-production. And the British end called me up after I got back from that show, The Monkey King. And they called me up and said, remember us? We did that American British co-production. Mm-hmm. Well, we want to do a British-Chinese co-production, and we wondered if you would consider ever going to China. And I said, I just got back.
Oh no! Hey.
I said, I've got a crew.
Oh my gosh!
And so I went back, and I met this wonderful. I worked with this wonderful DP, and he and I started doing some projects together after that, and we taught workshops, and we taught a workshop at Beijing Film Academy, and this is in 2011, getting into 2012. And then we did another project together. And after that, I started a company, or I didn't start the company. I joined a Chinese company that had just finished Painted Skin and some other, I think, Tai Chi Boy or Tai Chi guy.
Tai Chi Master.
One of those 2010, 2011, 2012.
Well, one thing I wanted to ask is that you're very much a technical guy, but you also have like a screenwriting background. So that leads me to this next question. Now, what are because these are two different worlds. Now, what are 2 or 3 different main tasks you do on a typical day? Now, no day is typical anymore. But just so the audience understands what you're doing now, tell us about your days.
Well, now, we've had to adapt. We're in the midst of a pandemic that just won't quit. However, the main task now is maintaining well, first thing I do is I get up and I take my dog for a walk, which is kind of nice.
Good,
I get outside, I go down the street. But the main things that are needing to be done in my life right now are constantly communicating with all of the people that I was consulting with and had projects with in China that all got put on hold. So you've got to just keep those things going. And once things settle down in China and everything opens up and you don't have to do 2 weeks in a hotel every time you fly in and out. And, when things kind of get back to normal, and a lot of that's going to depend on Americans getting their shit together. It's just ridiculous. We've got people dying left and right who think that getting vaccinated is getting tattooed with the sign of the beast. It's just it's hard to believe that we live in 20th century America and we're hearing this insane kinds of rhetoric. Anyway, but when things get back to normal, we've got to be able to get ready to jump right back in the saddle and move forward quickly. The other things that I'm doing, because I'm here, is I'm working on American projects for the American audience. So I've got several projects that I'm working with other people. And so I'm doing those things. That's pretty much all day long.
That leads me to my next question. You're talking about you're trying to get these.
Which means you get no sleep either, because you're up all night talking to China and you're up all day, working with Americans. So
yeah, exactly.
That's why I look so.
This is just. You look great. Unfortunately, the audience can't see your face because it's just audio. But
lucky them.
Now you talked about trying, keeping these Chinese projects alive, and hopefully when things open up again, they can get going. That leads me to the question of how do you find your business partners, and how do you suggest the audience find perhaps a Chinese producer?
Well, I was fortunate enough that I got there early before it was cool, just at the beginning when the China market was getting ready to bust. I mean, the China market came alive, like I said, with Hero and Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. That's when they realized there was a market for commercially viable stories that were done well. And up until then, I think the history was mostly propaganda type films. And then,
right.
Zhang Yimou and Chen Kai-ge, and, there were some early, really art type stuff that got made. But it really wasn't a commercially viable theatrical market in China. And so that was what was emerging when I first got here. And, it's just a numbers thing. The numbers haven't changed. The audiences, I mean, the theaters, when I first got here, there was maybe 100 theaters. And I mean, I'm exaggerating. But then from that point on, I think it was like 100,000 a day were being added to third-tiered cities, fourth-tiered cities, and all over the place. And the growth of the industry, people knew that there was a market. It was awakened by those films I was just talking about. And so just a numbers thing, it became apparent that it was worth investing in. And so that's what happened. There was those years, there was a lot of investment in Chinese theater, probably quite premature by people who had no right investing in a lot of the projects, who also lost their asses, and a ton of crap got made. But there were some good things. But what it did though is it got a lot of Westerners. I was just one of many who got invited to come here to share their expertise and their experience from having had hundreds of years of Hollywood filmmaking distilled into people who had I had 20 something years Hollywood experience by the time I got to China. So
for people who don't have that 20-year background, maybe someone starting out new, how would they find a Chinese producer?
Well, first of all, you have to look at the reasons you want to find a Chinese producer.
Right.
I mean, if you want to find a Chinese producer because you have a Chinese story that's dying to be told, and you have insight into what's going on in China, and you think that this would be poignant and commercially viable, then, I would say definitely move forward. But if you have a project that you couldn't find a producer in America, which that's not totally, I mean, the trying to find a producer in America is even worse because the studios have everything wrapped up. And there was a viable indie industry up until when I left, but after that it just never recovered. So I can understand people not getting a producer here for their projects and wanting to look at other places. But I mean, if that's your case, that you can't get a producer here for your project, and you're thinking that, well, Hollywood is, Beijing is the next rising star. I mean, the industry is moving. It's going to be huge. That's the place for you to go to get your big jump start, because you're going to fail. I just want to say that right off the bat. What I would do if you're a storyteller is I would say, start learning Chinese, get your butt over to China, live there, and for finding partners, I think the best thing to do is there are so many cinematic events going on in China. There's, the Chinese Writers Society mixer at the May Bar and the Rosewood Hotel, every other month. There's the film festivals. The Jiazhangke just started a new festival. Actually, it's probably 4 or 5 years old up in his hometown, and mainly geared towards indies and stuff. But you go to the festivals, you go to all of the industry parties, you go to join groups, and what happens is you network, you start meeting people, and people get to know who you are, and they get to trust you. And the fact that by now you can speak a little bit of Chinese, and you're involved in the culture, and you can eat with chopsticks.
Yeah.
Like there's ways to meet the big guys. Once you've gotten in, and once you get, the culture, and you have stories that you want to tell with Chinese writers, because especially if you're not Chinese and you're American, you need help. And now's a good time, because there's a lot of Chinese writers that don't have a lot of experience. It's just because the Chinese industry is so young, 10 years old of solid, filmmaking, and most of those were flops. And so, finding an experienced filmmaker like the guy Shi Huan from Lost in Thailand.
Yeah.
He made an okay film, but now he's considered God. And, to try and work with something like him, he's got movie after movie for the next 10 years, and his rates are like through the ceiling. He gets paid more than Hollywood studio writers on blockbusters.
Wow, really?
That's because, you get one hit, and then everybody gobbles you up.
Wow.
So any of the experienced screenwriters are almost unattainable. So, you've got to be the screenwriter, you've got to be the storyteller, and you've got to partner with a Chinese person after you've lived there for a while. So you get you get to understand the culture, because, when you first go there, if you don't live there, you can't pick it up from Chinese movies. You have to go there and live. And when I first got there, I made so many mistakes. I thought I was the shit. I'm from Hollywood, and I didn't understand the beautiful culture that exists in China. There's just this wonderful respect that everybody has for each other, and tolerance, and there's everybody will help you, and there's a lot of love and kindness. I know I'm painting like this crazy picture, and
utopia.
Utopia. But it seems that way. You go into a meeting with an exec, and you pitch a story, and they're all nodding and being positive and being lovely, because they're lovely people. And you tell them you think you're going to close the deal, and you say, yeah, so you in? And they all go, yeah, oh yeah. You walk out of there thinking, God, that was simple,
I made it.
I scored a deal, right? But what that really means is you got to understand the culture. It's for 5,000 years. If somebody asked you something, the answer was yes. Or the person that's asking you to do something would say, okay, take his head off. You just said no, And so it was kind of a brutal 5,000 years. It's amazing where they are today. And that's what I love about it is what's the progress that's happened in the last 30 years is model for what the rest of the world should be like.
Yeah.
But anyway,
so you don't get a no.
You don't get a no, because what they're saying is, yes, I don't want my head chopped off.
Right. Okay.
So you've got to realize that these are this is part of the culture.
That's part of the culture. And, okay.
But these are cultural icons that you get to realize and get to know and get to enter into your Chinese stories that you're writing with your Chinese writing partners, who are going to take care of all the dialogue and making sure things happen in the dumpling shop and that sort of thing.
Okay.
But there's a lot of anyway, go ahead.
What?
I start talking and it's like blah, 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 blah.
Okay. What, excuse me, you talked about, you have all this experience in China. Tell us about an obstacle you encountered on a past project. How did you solve it, and what did you learn? Or how did you overcome it? You maybe didn't solve it, but how did you overcome it?
I kind of touched on that, not knowing or understanding the culture and thinking that I was like king shit from being from Hollywood. You become humble really quickly, especially when you're having dinner with somebody that's worth $1 billion, and these people are so totally, not acceptable.
Accepting?
No, available. They're totally available. Yeah, I mean, you can get to the top people pretty quickly that are the decision makers. In Hollywood, you have to go layers and layers and layers.
That doesn't sound like a bad problem.
No, it's not a bad problem. It's not a bad problem.
No, what would be like a problem you had on a past project?
Well, there was a production that I was on that I didn't understand how early Chinese productions worked. And they work a little bit differently than what professional Hollywood shows should like. And I've worked all over the world. I've worked in Africa, and Europe, and South America, and I've been to the Arctic Circle on shows. And I've worked with local people from all over, and I just thought that everybody made films the same. I mean, there's a Hollywood model, and that's the model everybody does. So, you sort of expect things to go a certain way, and then when they don't, you think that people are messing up, and you have to learn that. Well, when I first came here, I had to learn that being more tolerant and accepting and understanding that everybody was doing the best that they could. And so that was a sort of and they call that the cultural issues that every low-eye gets when they come to China. And
right.
I'm American, man. I'm the shit. I hate Americans now. When they show up anywhere, I go, I was that person. Oh God.
Okay. Well, okay. So yeah, I can understand. I mean, you were there in the beginning, when it was a very early film industry. So yeah, of course it had some growing pains. Now, if you could wave your wand and magically solve 2 current problems, what would they be?
Oh, I would hurry up and get the Chinese film industry into realizing that it is a business. It's not a hobby. It's not even, it's an art form, but it's like 50-50 art and business. You can't have one without the other.
Right.
And there needs to be some, policing of how productions are run. There needs to be maybe a little bit more towards the Hollywood system, because let's face it, Hollywood movies have been made evolved into being made a certain way, which it got exported all over the world because it worked as a business and as a efficient, economical way to create art on a 2-dimensional screen. And they've perfected it. There's a certain hierarchy and an order, and it's not a democracy. It's there's like a royalty, and but it's hierarchy. But there's a certain model that does work, and a lot of the productions in China end up going over budget and over schedule because the director is considered also the all-knowing God and producer and everything.
Right.
And the producers on set, there are no, which is a disservice, I think, for a lot of directors, because directors need to have people that they trust and rely on that want to do the same thing that they want to do, is to tell their story and get it onto the screen in the best way. And, it can't be done by one person and his assistant and or her assistant. And it needs to be done quite in a business-like manner. And so I think that and this is happening actually, because it's happening because it has to happen, and it would never happen on its own. No directors or the filmmakers that are making, the studio people now, they've got their system and they're not going to change it. But what's going to change it is the fact that there have been a lot of mistakes made and there's been a lot of money lost, and there's been a lot of money going to the wrong places. And so a lot of production has kind of died for the time being. But the fact that the numbers are there, the theaters are there, the audience, people say, oh, it's streaming is going to ruin the movie. People have been saying that things like that were going to ruin the movie business since the 50s, since the television came out. I mean, the iPhone is going to ruin the movie. That's bullshit. All of that's bullshit. What you need is you need good product, you need theaters, and you need an audience. Now, the only thing missing here in China is a lot of the good product part. And a lot of that has been because it's a young industry, and they kind of got off on the wrong foot with the whole director as czar. And but big business is starting to look at the numbers, and they realized. So there's a sort of a Western style of funding, film finance, that is slowly creeping its way into China. And what they do is they look at your project as if it were a business. And they look at who the people are that you're working with. They read the script, and they determine if the script is viable and has commercial possibilities, and they look at your schedule and they see if it's a reality. They're film experts, basically, are who these film funders rely upon to evaluate the shows, and then they will go ahead and they will fund your show. And they also have producers on board that if you start to go astray, it's in the contracts that they will step in and take over your production. And that's how things work in America and the rest of the world, where you're getting film finance funding. And that's going to happen in China, and that's a very good thing.
So the two problems, one was like the hierarchy or the kind of the disorganization on a Chinese film set, hoping that they adopt more of the Hollywood model.
Well, it's organized, but just in the kind of the wrong way.
Right.
I mean, there's no oversight, and I don't care how talented you are, you may go astray. I mean, Wong Kar-wai took 5 years to make one movie, right? I mean, and if you're an artist and you're a good filmmaker, in China especially, there's investors waiting to get a piece of the pie. So when you say, "Oh, I just ran out of money and now we got to shoot another month," somebody will step forward and give you another month's worth of money. And
that's pretty amazing.
That you got to be big.
Okay.
There's only a few filmmakers.
Let's qualify that.
If I make a movie, then I get it.
So is the second problem, the second one you would magically like to solve, to have more of a Western financing model?
Well, it's going to creep in. That's going to move in. That's the solution to that problem. And so that's a problem with kind of a solution, and there's a future there. And that gives the opportunity for these kids that come over to China that want to get involved in the Chinese industry. Now, the reason you want to do that is if you love making films. And I mean, in LA, you can walk up to anybody and go, "Hey, how's your script going?" Just a stranger on the street, the Uber driver that picks you up. How's your script?
Yeah,
and they'll tell you.
How did you know? Of course.
So, I mean, the opportunities for getting your projects done in Hollywood it's like a needle in a haystack. I mean, win the lottery if you win a script competition. But
in China, it's not like that.
No. In China, in America, the studios have the theaters all wrapped up, and they have distribution all wrapped up, and and so that's a problem trying to get indies together.
Right,
I mean,
right,
you have
right,
to
right.
you have to know famous actors who want to be in your projects for no money and get a producer's cut,
Right,
off the
right,
back
right.
end. And I mean, there's ways to get things done in America, but it's much harder. And in China right now, all you have to do is make a good movie. You can scrape together. I mean, the indies, I've made indies in the United States for $300,000-$400,000.
Mhm.
And I mean, if you can make a good movie in China for hardly any money, and there's money available easily for those kinds of things. And if you tell a good story, you will make a lot of money. And that's the difference between Hollywood and China. So if you want to be involved in the film business, China is the place the film business is about to, explode. It's soon, I think this past year, probably, because of the COVID,
Right,
they've got the largest box office in the world right now.
right.
And
Yeah,
that's insane.
Yeah,
that is insane. When I first went to China, they were 40th, and it's just, and that's what's going to happen. So they need people there now who can tell a good story. Now, storytelling isn't secretive. I hear, people in China like, we have our own way of telling our stories. Yeah, it sucks, and you're not making any money. You've blown all your money. There's a universal way to tell stories, and it wasn't the Americans, it wasn't Hollywood that figured it out. It's like the Americans can't take the credit. I mean, the Greeks did it.
Yeah, Aristotle.
Aristotle. Years and years ago, and the reason why that's still with us through all of the different cultures that tell stories is because it works.
It works.
And so, what we need to do is we need to not say that, the rest of the world, we have our own way of telling our stories. And yes, China has thousands of years of these huge adventurous stories that just have so much meaning and depth. And but you can't take like one little section of the Monkey King on his way to India to get the tablets where he fights the spider women and turn that into a story. It still has to have story elements.
Right.
And then yes, you can tell all of these stories.
Well, this is very encouraging for writers. This need for writers. But speaking of that, what sort of future projects are you looking to do, and what do you think the Chinese studios are looking to do? COVID aside, let's say next year.
Well, people say, "Oh, China's got the, they're into the patriotic movies, 800, like that crazy sci-fi movie that was so technically perfect. China Saves the Moon, or China Flies to the Moon, or China Saves the World from the Asteroid, or something. That movie.
Yeah, the Wandering
Earth. Wandering Earth. So well done. So such a Hollywood quality level movie, which goes to show you now that the original thing that I came over and I was working with Chinese filmmakers on was bringing that technology. They have it now, as can be seen by Wandering Earth. But they're still, that movie didn't do well around the world because it didn't have the key element, which was those little elements that Aristotle gave us.
Right.
And, you throw a little bit of Aristotle and Wandering Earth and you've got a Hollywood blockbuster.
Right. So do you think that these propaganda movies, is that like what the future holds for China?
No, not at all. No. It's like what I said before. All you need is a good movie. I mean, look at Dengal a couple years ago.
Right.
Here's a movie that did, it was an art house movie that did kind of okay around the world. But the Indian culture is very much like the Chinese culture. There's multidimensional families and,
right.
Grandparents and kids, and the parents work, and the grandparents and the babies. They have lots of history, similar histories. And so there's, this Dengal story. And one of the things Dengal did right was it did like the Sony Picture Classics method of distribution. It started small in China at a few theaters because, who's that guy that was distributing all those Indian movies back in those days? He was partnered with the guy from the embassy, the Indian embassy, the cultural department of the. Anyway, I forgot his name. Alan, okay. Maybe. But he started that movie small in these little tiny theaters, and it was word of mouth that started, to grow, and WeChat is a wonderful thing. There's like this incredible thing that's going to make or break you in China, and that's the social media. And it's like wildfire. Everybody's always on their iPhones doing the whole the WeChat thing. But word got out that this was a pretty cool film. And it wasn't even in Chinese. It was in Bengali or something. And so it started getting a wider release. And then once the theater owners realized, this is something, it got a huge release. And it was probably one of the biggest box office hits of the year that year, which goes to show you that was a low budget art house film, but it told a good story.
Right.
And, it was a sports genre type film, but it had a family issue involved.
That's right.
And it hit on all the points that you need to hit on. And it's kind of like, sure, the government wants you to make these patriotic type movies, and you've got to go through SARFT or whatever it is nowadays. And so there is like, you're bound by the censorship into like certain genres, but there's no reason why you can't exist within those genres and tell good stories. I mean, Hollywood went through that in the 20s, 30s. We up until a certain point, the swinging 20s or the swinging 30s, whatever it was.
Roaring 20s.
The roaring 20s, yeah. I mean, there was some crazy stuff in the films. I mean, there was lots of sex and kinds of stuff. And then things, the censorship started happening here, and we started, we get Singing in the Rain, and we get, those kinds of movies. But during that period of time, there were a lot of great movies that got made. So, I mean, saying that, we're bound by the censors because we can't, have sex and drugs and corrupt cops and school systems that are failing our youth, because we can't do anything juicy, we can't tell a good story. That's all bull.
Are you talking about Chinese censorship?
Yeah, I'm talking about movies in China, people using excuses that they can't make movies in China because they're bound by censors and the restrictions are so great. I say that they can't tell stories. There are a lot of stories that could be told that will fit within the regulations and rules and regulations. And one thing you got to get used to when you get to China is that there are rules and you don't screw with them, man.
Okay.
They make it black and white. This is what you can do. This is what you can't do. And then you just do those things and you're good. You're fine.
Okay. You have to be a little creative to get around, to have a juicy story.
Well, there's ways. I mean, there's a lot of, here's what a lot of filmmakers do. Like Ning Hao, for example. He looks at Western movies and he combines Western movies and then remakes them in China and he makes them Chinese and he makes the stories his own, but he's able to not have to really start from scratch.
Okay.
He is influenced by a lot. He's smart. He allows himself, to be open and watches a lot of movies and knows what's cool. And that's very important is like being able to know what's cool. And even though he still runs around with those, sports jumpsuits and, the purple.
I didn't know that.
That's one of those things for a while, all the directors were dressing.
Okay.
Like,
well, here's a trick question for you. What question did I not ask you that I should have?
How to come up with a good story.
How do you come up with a good story?
I think that I was just touching upon that. And, it might have been a continuation of what I was just going to say, but I'm going to incorporate that into your question anyway. And that is, you don't have to make stories up from scratch. You can allow yourself to be influenced by all of the other stories that have ever been made. Because I think, what do the experts say? There's only been 5 stories. There's like Row, Row, Row Your Boat, Mary Had a Little Lamb, I don't know, 2 or 3 others. And then they're all just rehashed over and over and over again.
Right. So
I would say watch as many movies as you. I watch movies every day. And that's what you just get into how stories are told, and then you find yourself with your Chinese writers, and then you start coming up with projects. I mean, to meet people, to pitch them, the next thing you've got to do is you've got to get your pitch together, because there's a million people in China with their scripts that they're dying to tell, but they don't know how to pitch. It's like you got to become a marketing person and a writer and a mini producer, and you've got to learn to cook for yourself and eat with chopsticks. But one of the things you need to do is you need to know how to pitch, because you're going to go to these festivals. You're going to start seeing the same people. They're going to be on panels, and what you got to do is you don't want to stalk like the head of Wanda. But, you've got to have a pitch down that's like your elevator pitch, right? So that, when you get into the elevator with them, you kind of say something, oh, it's a beautiful day. That's your first time. You don't go right into your pitch.
Okay.
You say something nice, or you know all of the people that you're going to talk. You know all the people on the panels. You know their wives. You know the work that they've done. You know the movies that they've made. You know what kind of kids they've had. You know what countries they've traveled to. You know what kind of drinks they like. You get into the elevator. You have to improvise, not say anything about a movie.
Okay.
But get them laughing and say something funny.
Good.
Then the next one, say that's the Shanghai Film Festival, right? Uh-huh. So then, next time you run into them, it's the Beijing Film Festival. Now, the guy's seen you before. You've had a little laugh. And the next time you see the guy, you say, those things you gave me, those ideas you gave me on my last project really helped a lot.
Okay.
You gotta bullshit. You gotta figure out ways to just feed the ego, like, yeah, man, you really helped me out on with some suggestions, and then they're going to wonder, they're going to go, I must know this guy. And
there's the secrets out. The secrets out.
Secrets out. See, the thing is, you got to do your homework. You got to figure out who all of the shakers and movers are. You got to figure out what projects they've done, what they like, do they golf, whatever. And then you got to meet with them, and then you got to foster. It's not stalking. Okay, don't tell anybody I'm a stalker.
Right.
But you got to be able to chit chat, and then pretty soon, these people are lovely people. The Chinese people are just wonderful, and they'll give you the shirt off your back. I've a lot of stories. I guess one of the things you're also going to learn how to do, and I hope this thing kind of goes away, is you end up going to these dinners where you're drinking baijiu like crazy, and everybody wants to come up to you and do a toast with you. So you're like the fulcrum of everybody else getting drunk and you're getting whipped. One of the things you need to learn is how to hide the drinks.
That's right. That's
so that
right.
it doesn't look like, that's
Right.
a very important lesson
Yeah.
for all your listeners.
Yeah. Put water in your glass.
Yeah. But don't get caught.
Yeah. Okay. Besides, that's good advice.
So you got to learn how to do the whole party scene, and and then still look good in the morning.
Okay.
Right? But that's where a lot of deals get made. Is when you're both drunk, looking at each other, going, "I love you, man. I love you, man." A lot of it has to do with trust, and a lot of it has to do with I'll die for you. I'll get drunk. I'll drink this baijiu and risk my life.
Oh, wow.
You.
Okay.
And so that's
okay. I definitely want to party with you. Okay, so what advice would you give those aspiring to tap into the China market besides water instead of baijiu and know how to drink?
You gotta want to make Chinese movies because that's the upcoming place to be making movies. You gotta want to just make movies first, and you got to realize that China is the place that it's happening. So my best chances of getting a movie off the ground, if I'm good, if I can tell a freaking story, which most people have a hard time at, is to actually just go to China and do all of the things that I was talking about doing.
Right.
And get into the China culture and get to understand the China culture. You can't, making Chinese movies in China is what I suggest, because that's where the money is, and that's where the new market is, and that's about to explode, and that's where all the opportunities are. But as far as types of stories, I have a friend right now who's going to Canada to shoot his Chinese movie, which is going to be partially in English and partially in Chinese. Because the reason I bring this up is I was just about to say that make Chinese movies in Chinese for Chinese people and tell a good story, and you'll be fine. And you'll make money and you get to make your movies. But this is just an example of me being wrong. Because I'm sure there's people listening that are going, he's full of shit. But, this guy's going to Canada. He's got a true story about what happened to a Chinese student that was going to school in America. Uh-huh. And the father ends up going over to look for the daughter. And it's sort of like this suspense mystery crime with some action and brilliant story. I mean, the guy's got a translator who has to translate for you, and that's another thing. I'll segue into in a minute. But so here's going to be a story that's actually going to be one of those Chinese movies that can actually travel because it takes place in America. They're speaking English. The stars are speaking Chinese. We get to know what he's saying through the translator, and so the Chinese get to watch this movie because it's about a Chinese father who is traveling to help his daughter who's a student in America. And we all know America is a dangerous place, and they're right. But speaking of, so that's the odd rule to the making Chinese movies for Chinese people in a Chinese language. But that's what I would suggest: making Chinese movies for Chinese people.
When you were going to say something about translators.
Oh, translators. That's another one of the things that sort of saved me when I first got to China. When I was thinking I was God's gift to filmmaking in China, and my translators were, especially my one translator who became my best friend, who became a dear family member almost. She was so diplomatic that I could just be screaming at these guys, because at one project I had 40 people working for me that I was responsible for making shit happen. And I, would run around and scream, and then she would translate in this little sweet voice saying, he would be so happy if you could possibly consider maybe doing this in this kind of way.
That's diplomacy.
And that's what you need. You need to get yourself hooked up with some good translators while you're learning the language.
Right.
Because you can't go to China and not learn the language. I mean, it's
right.
And, it's a difficult language to learn, but...
Now, in conclusion, is there any social media details you'd like to share or any projects you want to plug?
Nothing that is solidly worth mentioning other than the fact that I'm also working with some entertainment amusement park projects that have media playing in them, because for the last several years, I was working with a company as the China rep for a visual effects company called Redefine. And so I managed to end up working on a lot of Chinese projects and films, and also did some visual effects stuff for these amusement parks. So that's another area of storytelling. I mean, it's all telling stories, Wow. Even a still life tells a story, right?
Right.
Still life painting. So that's an exciting thing that's also going. As far as websites go, I'm on WeChat. You could look in any of your filmmaker groups. You could just type in Keith, and you'll come up with me. And I probably belong to the same groups you do.
Okay.
And then just add me.
Okay, great. Well, Keith, this has been very entertaining for sure. So really, thank you for coming on the show today.
You got to entertain, right? Isn't that what life's all about? Isn't that what storytelling is about?
Exactly.
That's why you want to make movies in China. You want to make entertaining movies. I mean, Stephen Chow is one of my favorite filmmakers in China. He's, his Kung Fu Hustle and Shaolin Soccer. I mean, some great stuff. There's been great movies that came out of China. And there's going to be so much. I mean, there's 1.4 billion viewers there, right? Potential viewers, right?
Yeah.
And so it's going to become a business, and the industry is going to be all the better for it. So I'm really excited. I'm really hopeful for the industry, and I think it's just going to be a good ride for anybody who can hop on it and endure and have patience. Like I said, it's going to take you years to get into the market, and you're going to have to stalk those people and say those things in the elevator.
Foster. I think you said the word is foster.
Foster relationships. All right, there. Thank you. Okay. It's been a pleasure. I've had a blast.
Thank you.
All right, cheers.
And I'll see you at the premiere.
I'll see you there. Cheers.
Cheers. And now for my 3 key points and 3 takeaways. 3 key points. Number 1, why do you need a Chinese producer? Keith points out that China is where the growth is. However, not finding a producer or financing partner in America is not the reason to look for one in China. To attract a Chinese producer, your story needs to be commercially viable in China. See my blog, How to Find a Chinese Partner. You can also check out podcast number 18, How to Find a Chinese Business Partner. Number 2, Chinese writing partners. Now is the perfect time, according to Keith, to get in on the China market. The industry is young, and the universally accepted Hollywood story structure, i.e. the hero's journey or heroine's journey, is new to most Chinese writers. That's your opportunity. Hollywood story structure combined with Chinese culture is a dynamite combination. And you'll have a better luck getting a Chinese producer if you have a story that resonates with Chinese audiences. See my URL in the show notes about the China List's free trial for writers, which includes access to our private writing jobs page. If you are looking for a Chinese writing partner, you can download my ebook on the China Hollywood Greenlight, How to Find a Chinese Writing Partner. Number 3, how to come up with a good story. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. Keith advises getting inspiration from older films and put your own unique spin on them. There are many books out there that tell you how to do this. Personally, I like Your Idea Machine by William Martell. Find a film that you wish you wrote or has a theme that resonates with you. Change the time period or change the genre, i.e. turn a horror film into a romantic comedy, etc. You can even change the hero from male to female or vice versa. There are many ways to take a winning formula and give it your own spin. Now, 3 takeaways. Big money. According to Keith, top Chinese writers make more money than most Hollywood blockbuster writers. In China, if you make one good film, you are in. Keith says since the really good Chinese writers are booked for years, it's difficult for Chinese producers to find quality scripts. Writers, listen up. This is your opportunity. Find a Chinese writing partner and get your piece of the action. Number 2, the right way to pitch. The best way to pitch is to plant the seed at one market, chit-chat with an exec you targeted, then at the next market, add to that conversation with the same film exec. You're fostering a relationship. Don't pitch your project the first time you run into an exec in an elevator. Start a relationship first. Number 3, Western financing models are creeping into China. Keith says the challenge with Chinese films is the director is like a god. There's not a lot of oversight, but due to many investors losing money, the Western model of financing and oversight is creeping into China. In the West, if a director flagrantly goes over budget or over schedule, an investor can bring in an outside producer to get the project back on track. Well, that's the show. Thank you for listening. To show your support, please go to iTunes, subscribe, and leave a rating so other people can find this podcast. These ratings really do help spread the word. Producers and talent reps, membership to the China list is free. You can also post calls for submissions on our private writing jobs page. Just go to https:// Writers, get in on our 60-day free trial soon. It expires November 1st, 2021. You can get your material seen in Hollywood and China. And you can post requests for Chinese or Western writers on our private writing jobs page. Use this URL before November 1st, 2021 to sign up. https://chnlist.com/promo. That's the show. Thank you for listening, and I'll see you at the premiere. Bye. 一会儿见.